So one of the first things I do after I set a baseline that I'm not nuts, you didn't waste your money or time, but as the room is available to it, I say to the new trainees, I'm going to fuck up. So let's just get that out of the way. And what it does is it brings air into the room. And then I share with the group, I have a potty mouth. My son told me that early on. And so I'm working on it.
This is Rebel Therapist, a podcast for entrepreneurs who are trained as therapists and who want to level up their businesses, make a bigger impact, feel fulfilled, and be very well paid. I'm your host, Annie Schusler. You want to move beyond one-on-one and create a group program? One common question from my participants who want to grow a group program is, what kind of skills do I need to be able to facilitate a group really well? I got someone here on the pod to share her unique process of leading large groups in an expansive, liberated, and trauma-informed way. Introducing Tracy Gantlin-Monroy. Tracy is a licensed professional counselor and resident therapist at Grace Community Counseling and Social Services in Atlanta, Georgia. She's a brain-wise body therapist passionate about trauma healing. Tracy is the first Black female brain spotting trainer in the world, having been mentored by Dr. David Grand, founder and developer of Brain Spotting. Tracy also runs healing retreats for Black women, among many other things. Her attendees call her engaging, loving, and caring, and they talk about feeling safe in her groups even when they don't usually feel safe in groups. We're going to dive into how she does this. You're going to hear how she prepares for trainings, how she holds people as an empath, and how she teaches at the speed of safety. Welcome, Tracy. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, Annie, for sharing the platform. And if I may give a land acknowledgement to the Muskogee and Cherokee Native Americans as I sit here in Atlanta, Georgia. And I just want to honor the natives and acknowledge the land that I'm on and the people, right, that this land belongs. It's like they belong to the land and the land belong to and with them. So thank you.
Thank you. So what I want to dive into with you, as you know, is kind of the magic that you bring to groups and group facilitation and how you do it. So one thing I noticed when I talked to you last was that you were saying, the way I heard it was you were saying, I come from the same place and I'm the same person no matter what role I'm in. I come with the same purpose and the same energy no matter what role I'm in. And that really had kept percolating with me, that I think for so many of us, when we're stepping into a situation where we're either public speaking or running a large group or even running a small group, something about our performance anxiety comes up. Something about, am I enough comes up. And we almost try to be a different person in that situation. And I'm wondering if you could say a little bit about coming with the same energy, coming with the same purpose, whether you're talking to one person or leading a large group of people.
Yeah, so thank you for that question, because what it does is it kind of puts me in a place to process through that with intentionality. Because what I've learned about myself through experiencing others is my ability is not about doing it as much as being it, because it's all about embodiment, right? And so when it comes to my personhood, I don't know how to dress for Annie and then dress for Mercedes or dress for this event or dress for these people. That's overstimulating for me. And so it becomes the testament of self-acceptance, being present, mindfulness. And with that, Annie, as we even look around this, when I look at the multifaceted roles and responsibilities and expectations go with every role, there's a form. For me, I have found there's power in the yes and there's power in the no. With that being said, anyone's ask of me is secondary to what resonates with my system, what resonates with my spirit, and knowing and being able to be okay with what that looks like. Because when you talk about curating space for different than me, because that's what happens as a brain spotting trainer and the first Black female brain spotting trainer in the world, I already come with an experience that becomes the lens by which I receive brain spotting from my mentor, Dr. David Grant, and how I give that to community, which are the trainees, which becomes the idea of connection, which reinforces what brain spotting is about because it's experiential. And I'm using brain spotting because it's made me more attuned neurobiologically and relationally, person to person. So being able to be my authentic self has everything to do with attunement and how that resonates one to the other, that it allows the curation to be that at the speed of safety, honoring all the energies, all the spirits, even when it comes to the roles, whether it is that I am in the role of wife or mom, or as a practitioner, or as a businesswoman. It's all applicable because it all comes from the core of personhood. And I think that's the major piece because I think authenticity can only come as we sit with ourselves because so many of us operate externally. By nature, I think it's conditioning, but we look at it as by nature because all the isms come into play. And so just working from my base
Mm.
of a marginalized, right? When we think about intersectionality, okay, I'm a woman. Add to the woman, I'm Black. I identify as American Black. So there's privilege there with dominance. I'm American. That's dominant in and of itself. I mean, it's even been said to us that we've been what, the first power in the world? How long? Is what they've said. When we think of other nations, other countries, and things of that nature, America has been a hallmark. They refer to us as the West in civilization, even. So that in and of itself, no matter where I travel in the world, when I open my mouth, they're like, "You're American." I'm like, "I am." And I say it with pride. I am America, here and there, wherever there might be. But that's at the base. And along with that, I'm a woman, which becomes subordinate, marginalized, because patriarchy and colonization happened all over the world. I'm very clear about that. So I'm a woman. So that's subordinate, that's marginalized. And I'm Black, which is marginalized because dominant culture, white is privilege, right? When you start talking about Black and brown, subordinate. And so understanding what the grapevine says, it's important for me to internalize and identify as my system naturally moves, which defies a lot of the rules. Because just to be authentically you becomes defiance.
Yeah. When you're about to step into a space, let's say run a training, like let's say run a 3-day training, are there any rituals or is there anything that you do to bring yourself all the way into yourself as you step in? Or is it kind of just so easy for you at this point because it's just kind of how you do?
Thank you. Thank you. There is, because she's so human. as in me. And so I have this ritual. And with that, it's preparation is the ritual because it's important to me honoring others, honoring the trainees, honoring the people who have used their time, their resources. They've set aside things. Many have closed their practices, have taken leave off their jobs. They are absent from family because trainings are 3 days for brain spotting. And so before I encounter the faces, I already engage the energy and honor humanity. Because you see, Annie, I see every individual as a flower in the garden of God or a flower in the garden of humanity, just from my own orientation. So that first day of training, I usually don't sleep the night before.
Wow. What's happening as you're awake that night?
It's almost like I astral project and I leave my body and go to the heavenlies to just kind of listen in my spirit and my soul about the intent, right? And so I set the intentions out of body almost. And, I become contemplative, meditative through my body, not so much through my mind, because there's kind of like that separation there where I set myself aside. It's like minimizing my sense of self in the flesh. Because in order to be with brain spotting in and of itself, it's all about attunement and it's relational and it's neurobiological. Like the recall is going to come from my neocortical brain of what I know, what Dr. Grant has taught me. Like I was in seclusion for more than a year and I affectionately call him David. Like if you were to call him Dr. Grant, he would say, "Oh, it's just David." But there ain't no just to my boogaloo. And the world knows, especially in brain spotting community, that Dr. David Grant is my boogaloo. And as such, I affectionately refer to him as such. And he's my friend, he's my brother, he's my mentor. And so I understand that it's about the attunement. So my rituals, I don't sleep before that night of the first day of training. I don't sleep. I go in on that Friday because trainings are Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I go in on that Friday and my spirit has arrived before I arrived. So one of the first things I do after I set a baseline that I'm not nuts, you didn't waste your money or time. But as the room is available to it, I say to the new trainees, I'm going to fuck up. So let's just get that out of the way. And what it does is it brings air into the room. And then I share with the group, I have a potty mouth. My son told me that early on. And so I'm working on it. And then the chat goes crazy and says, I got a potty mouth too. And so what it does is it humanizes the group, right? And so after that first day, when we kind of set the group rules, and the only rule is I get to be all of me, which becomes an invitation for you to be all of you, whatever that looks like, which becomes a game changer. And it becomes a thing of shared power. And I allow people to know I am the responsible party here. The facilitators are here to support the training and your learning and to coach you and to be with you. And I allow people to know that learning a new skill already creates anxiety, right? So I have this way of moving. And that second day, yes, we're here to learn, but I also affirm humanity and the fact that we have from novice to experts in this. Like I give it to like I dismantle whatever power dynamic that's possible so that we can engage and be together and study together on the human level, that there's no big I's or little U's, and that we're studying together, which ironically increases confidence and that whole sense of ownership of thine own self and being, which gives a clearer pathway to establishing and holding that space And so the group holds it with me.
I'm thinking about how in doing it in that way and in communicating about it in that way, I'm wondering if like that's as big a thing as the participants are getting out of this 3-day training is like a different way of being, a different way of thinking about power, a different way of not just thinking about, but just experiencing learning. I'm thinking that must have a profound impact as much as learning is a tool.
I love the way that you're framing that because part of learning is the curve. And the fact of the matter is, we focus so much on the what sometimes when the fact is we know the what. We know we're here to learn brain spotting or whatever I'm teaching, right? Brain spotting is my go to, but the fact of the matter is, I'm SE trained, I'm IFS trained as well, and I'm also a retreat host. And so, where I'm going with that is, most people know the what, even when they come in session, because something motivated them to be there, to sit with us clinicians, right? So they know the what. But what I find that people struggle with is the how. So I'm all about the how because you're coming to learn this brain spotting or you're coming to this session, or even as a practitioner, I'm also an entrepreneur. Like, I know I have a practice. I know that I got to pay the rent. I know I got to pay the bills and things of that nature. And so it's all connected. So with that, it becomes the orienting or the orientation around that. And because I'm open, that exudes. I'm eclectic. That exudes. And so your personhood exudes in whatever we do. It just does. And so there's no need for me to take up space being challenged by my own self or questioning my own self or any of that. And so, with creating space in such a way that the first and foremost thing is the acknowledgement that we're all here together, that we all exist, and you get to be you, I get to be me. And then when we come to that place of the information, and the fact of the matter is, I learn something new or different every time. And it's by the attendees that attend my events that I'm able to even give you this construct because I'm giving what was given to me because I don't judge me. I don't critique me. Right. And because I've gotten better with my potty mouth, I was like, you know what? Just go ahead and make this intrinsically a part of the space that, this is the deal, because there's no need for me to apologize because I'm taking valuable time away from what we're here to do. And Annie, I just got to be totally transparent here. I hold people as an empath. It's like to hear trainees say this felt like a retreat kind of blows me away. To hear people that experience me say, you move at the speed of safety. I mean, imagine me with my 6 feet tall, Black woman bodied self standing up to a white man who's about 6'2", 6'3", my elder. And they say to me, I need to talk to you. And I'm like, okay, what's tea? What's going on? What do you want to talk about? As I'm eating, right? Because I like to eat. With that being said, I'm snacking on something, and this white elderly gentleman says to me, I owe you an apology. And I said, for what? And they say, when I was in phase 1 training with you, I was a student. This was like my first brain spotting training on earth. And I had questions because when I looked around the room, there was about 60, 70 white folks, and there were 3 people that looked like me. One I brought with me, and another sister had traveled from North Carolina. And so I begged the question. There was someone in the room who was vicariously known to me through a shared relationship we have. And I said, where are the people at? Where are the marginalized people? Where are the Black folk at? What's really going on? And this gentleman said to me in Florida, because I took phase 1 in Atlanta and traveled to Florida for phase 2, which this elderly gentleman was in both my phase 1 and phase 2. And when he asked to speak to me, and what he said to me was this, I owe you an apology because in phase 1, I was like, this woman is really irritating me. What is her problem? Because I'm open. Look, I don't have to be the trainer to express myself as a human being. I have that right. And what he said was, after sitting with it, I realized it was my racism. And I just wanted to apologize to you. And I affirmed, his tenacity and his courage. But I got to tell you, it didn't even register.
Mm. It didn't register, like in what way?
So my experience has been a bit different. And so I have been acculturated by dominant cultured white people way before I was enculturated by my tribe of people that look like me, which creates a beautiful balance that I'm able to do the social justice work that I do because I was actually called to it because for a period of my life, I felt safer with dominant cultured white people than I did people that look like me as a result of my own trauma, which came at the hand of Black girls and Black women. And the fact of the matter is, white folks were my protectors, right? Because even through an intersectionality lens, my parents did well. My mom was what they now call a mechanical engineer for Cummins Engine. She actually built truck engines. My dad, a longshoreman, and he owned a limousine service. So whenever me and my brothers missed the bus, my dad would just drop us off to school in a 6-door limo, 4-door limo, didn't matter because he was on his way to the city because we were living in the suburbs. And so for others to notice that and to witness that, kids make up their own stories, right? With their undeveloped brains, right? Because during that time, right? And so what that identified was difference, right? I come from a 2-parent home. My dad's the only man I ever seen my mom with. Very traditional family. We were the only ones that looked like me on my block. I was surrounded by upper middle class people. And so they've always thought I was astute, which kind of gave favor in different areas. I'm told I've always had a sense of grace, which has to do with my faith belief and my foundational development. I respect my elders. And these different nuances, I understand that I'm easy to be with. But with that being said, having that experience and seeing different than me as a positive and good things, like I didn't even know that racism was a real thing, because when I learned about my culture, when I learned about enslavement, when I learned about history, I'm from Charleston, South Carolina. And so I've always gallivanted the city as though it was history alive, even, the plantations, the slave museums and things of that nature. And my parents always gave a healthy context around that. So I knew from day one that I stood on the shoulders of my ancestors and I am the ancestors' dream. And I didn't have the negative connotations around that. And I didn't know that I was supposed to fear white people or different than me because I was Black, because I was socialized with white people with intimacy relationally. And so white people have always just been people to me because I understood that these people I'm engaging with and interacting with aren't the slavers. And I know that the same, it's oppressive, it's oppression, it's discrimination, it's racism. And I stand 10 toes down and I'm able and equipped to call that out, and I don't play no games. But along with that, there's something about love and kindness and humanity. You see, this isn't my work. This is my call. This isn't my job. This is my call. And my higher power has not commissioned me to be discriminatory, hate, any of that of anyone. And so I often say, no, because when you start talking about social justice and intersectionality, and when it comes to an uninformed society lacking a system or a systemic approach of how to heal this wound in our nation, for uninformed white people in particular, they see it as anti-white. Okay. They see it as something that it's really not. But what I'm about is truly inclusion of all people. But you got to start at some point. And the fact of the matter is, no person who's alive today was a slaver. It's not possible. Now, are there nuances systemically that reinforce racism, discrimination, patriarchy? Absolutely. But here's the deal, what I believe and what I know, my people were severely impacted by all that happened historically, ancestrally, in that. And I also believe that the generations that have come through the oppressor have also been traumatized and impacted because it's as simple as a prison. I believe that the prisoners and the correctional officers are both impacted. And the fact of the matter is, the correctional officers are doing the same time that the prisoners are doing, which creates an impact. They're there with a different intention, of course, but you're still at the same place, just like the oppressed and the oppressor, same locale. And so there's a way to hold all of that. And so when I say my life experience of having been acculturated by dominant, well off white people way before I was enculturated by my tribe that looks like me, it's real. For me, because in my community, I've heard all my life, you sound like a white girl. Or why are you, what's up with you? The fine arts? Ain't nobody doing that, Tracy. What's up with you? What the bah? I still go see the Nutcracker. But I also love Alvin Ailey's dance troupe that I go to the theater for that. One of my latest jaunts was Trevor Noah was in town. And I love Trevor Noah because, he went viral when he said, if you want to know, ask a Black woman. And I thought, something positive in the media referencing what a Black woman knows, because we as a community of women, you hear so much in and out of community about what we're not, this and that, and we've been so silenced. And so, Annie, when you ask me and make the inquiries that's happening in this moment, if I had to sum it up, then I am absolutely a summation of all my parts and self unapologetically. And that exudes because I've had so much practice.
We're going to get right back to the conversation. If you're a therapist or healer who wants a more lucrative business model where you get to do what you love, but you don't have to be running session after session after session and still barely making enough money, I have an offer for you. I want to invite you to check out my 8-week program called Create Your Program. You're going to learn how to design and launch your own pilot program. If you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. I'm going to teach you all about how to do it. Head over to rebeltherapist.me/create to learn more. All right, let's get back to the episode. I want to ask you something about, let's say with this gentleman who came up to you and like you've said, you were okay with it and you understand why some folks might feel like, please don't bring that up with me. Handle that and don't put it on me. Understanding both of those reactions. When you're in a group training, when you're facilitating a group training, what are you thinking about? How are you moving with it when, let's say, a white person is, in the delusion of white supremacy and says something hurtful? How do you move with that? Or what are you kind of thinking about as you're moving with that?
Quite frankly, Annie, I don't think when I'm in trainings, I feel and embody.
Yeah.
And I think that resonates and that exudes. It creates space for people to be their authentic selves. And when there is something racist, when there's something that's derogatory or discriminatory or further marginalizing, it goes so far beyond racism When we talk about intersectionality, which is my orientation, which becomes the vehicle for social justice for me. And so when someone comes on the floor with that, I gently and lovingly call it in, never out, and bring that awareness. And I operate from a perspective that I don't ask you to do anything. I don't demonstrate or teach you how to do. I make the assumption that you don't know. You can't know because you're a human being, there's humanity, and I know that your intention is good. Now, are we working under layers of trauma or your experience? Like someone close to me said that, and they're known as being performative, putting their foot in their mouth, white woman, and I would often encourage them to speak. And on one occasion, when they spoke, what came out is that they had been violated by a Black person. Now, our experience is impactful, right? Consciously, unconsciously, all these things. And so, what I find is people's perspective has so much to do with their experience. And I'm more interested in your experience than I am in what you're doing or maybe even what you're saying. Because if we can connect there, then we can have movement from a trauma informed perspective and just through abundant love. I'm a lover, Annie. I love, and what I desire actually, what I ask for is perpetual humility, right? And so just from that posturing, it affords my energy, my spirit, my knowing to go wherever it needs to go. And I don't find it laborious. Like, yes, it can be laborious and emotional labor for someone out of group to demand that someone in group teach them what they ought to know, right? Because that's your responsibility. And I'm just using it as an understood you to learn and get what you need to get, right? And so with oppression, there's been a trend of the oppressed having to serve the oppressor, creating that power dynamic as though someone owes you to teach you. It's not my job to teach you how to be with me. The work for us all is to learn and understand how to be with ourselves from a place of love, kindness, understanding, acceptance, different than me, understanding that different is a good thing, right? It's our job to understand what a microaggression looks like, what a macro assault is. What is marginalization? What does that mean? Like when I hear language or words I don't understand, I'll look them up.
Yes. You last time we talked, you gave this example of like with pronouns, if you hear someone resisting using the right pronouns for someone, how you handle that, which I had to tell my partner about who goes by they, them. Will you share a little bit about that now? About like just what you feel and find yourself saying or doing if someone's, let's say, resisting using the pronoun someone has stated?
At the core, once you know, and because it's new, right? So it takes a minute for something for new information to be integrated, right? So once you know, and once someone has identified, because we all have the right to identify how we identify. And I find with, baby boomers, some Generation X, right? They're the hardest to work with because they'll say derogatory things like, they, them, what is that? What is non-binary? What are they talking about? It's he, she, it. Lovingly, initially, I will give a ginger redirection, reframing. Then when they start telling me what they can't do,
Mm-hmm.
then they start switching my energy because
Mm-hmm.
I don't tolerate disrespect of any type. Because after you've been made aware and you continue with that erasure and that dismissiveness, then that becomes problematic for me. as someone who identifies as a cisgender, heterosexual, Black woman, meaning cisgendered, meaning I was born female and I identify as female for those who may not know. But even when it comes to heterosexist, right? And they're homosexist too. Let me just say that, right? I don't split any verbs and I don't listen. And in any in group of community, yeah, there are challenges out of group, but there are also challenges in group. And so when I engage with people that just are determined to deracinate one's identity and refuse to identify how they have been asked, because when we're in these Zoom meetings, when we're in places, when we see name tags and it says they and them. So my invitation is this: even if it seems awkward for you, let's keep doing what's hard until it becomes easy. Because what I notice is when someone continues with the blatant disrespect, my tone changes. Because at that point, to witness blatant disrespect becomes problematic. Because some people, you can't speak nicely to them. You got to put a little bass in your voice for them to get it. And so I have been known to get the hard T's and the strong S when I am pretty much reprimanding. Because why do you keep doing this? Because you're negatively seeking attention, which is impacting and reinforcing that othering ism. And othering is discriminatory in and of itself. So just stop. You're being resistant to change that must happen.
I really appreciate this, Tracy. Just getting to hear the way that you move through this, where what I'm hearing is you start out and it's like it's not necessarily even just a strategy. It's very just radically honest that you start out feeling a lot of compassion, love. We're all here to learn. Let me call you in on this. And then what I'm hearing is you find another energy naturally comes to you because you're tuned into yourself and to others that becomes maybe all the way up to reprimand. Like, okay, enough. And I just love getting to hear that it's not just one way. It's like your way of moving with this is going to shift depending on what happens next.
Absolutely. Well, it has to, because I've been called to challenging work that there's not a lot of reference for. There really isn't. And it's experiential. And this type of work, this is reformatory, this is revolutionary work. I mean, Black women were the last to be granted the right to even vote after serving the white women and the Black men that just didn't find it prudent, that we needed that right. And so, I embody who I am unapologetically, and I extend that to all. And it's all through grace. And I can learn more from you with the lens of abundant love and connection. Like, we can get together and affect positive change that's not either or. It's and both. I operate from an and both baseline, inclusiveness. And there has to be an element of acceptance. There has to be an element of safety. There has to be an element of understanding. Because, see, we're setting the condition for all else that happens. And we all come with a trauma network, whether it's activated or not. It's there.
Yeah. Yep. So my mind is going to this amazing thing about you staying up all night and your spirit is doing work in that space before you get there. And are you sensing, is there a part of you that is sensing the spirits of the people who will be in that training ahead of time? Like, do you get a sense of, oh, I feel this energy in this group, or does that show up when the people show up?
Let me just say this. I am so left and intuitive and discerning. It's giftedness that some absent an understanding or awareness would find me cuckoo. But I think I've started a there's a reputation. Like there's stuff online about me and me speaking and things of that nature where when I ask, how did you hear about the training? They're like, I saw a video of you online and I needed some of that. Or someone, most of my business, even in private practice, comes from word of mouth. And also with the trainings, it's like a fierce grapevine. And so literally, I arrive to the training moment and there are no strangers in the room. And when I engage and when I speak, it can be very emotional because people come in spaces and they've not ever been seen, felt held. And as a clinician, there's this huge misconception that we fix people. No, as a clinician, we simply posture. We're facilitators. We posture the person that the body can do the work of healing because the brain and the body has the power to heal itself. It's in posturing, like I'm holding you at this brook of water until you're able to hold yourself that you might drink. Right. And what I love about brain spotting is that it brings me to the place of, see, this is where I learned about dual attunement. This is what I learned about resonance. And then when I went into SE, it was able to put some more meat on the bone because with brain spotting, you don't have to know what it is to know that it is. And because I'm curious about everything, like I see the stop sign and it says stop and it's red. But my curiosity is what's up under that red paint? What kind of metal is that? What's going on there? Is that plastic? Is that metal? What's happening? Is it aluminum? What is it? What kind of alloy is it? So with that, I'm really curious about people and their movements. Sometimes I can be like a mad scientist, like I'll watch people even in the trainings and I'll call on somebody and invite them to the floor and I'll start singing whatever, whatever, whatever. And the looks and the responses, or I'll tell you one, which is kind of funny to me because Black, Indigenous, and persons of color oftentimes identify with our ethnicity, with our culture, and things of that nature. I had an inclusive training and there were so many connections happening in there, but I could absolutely tell the dominant cultured people who were uncomfortable with the dominant cultured people that, like, I had a white man say, like, not even midway through the first day, when he shared that he was in the most racist city in the United States and that he literally feels invisible. And to hear a white bodied male to say that, it became very fetching for me to hear that commentary. And what I noticed is that the layers started peeling back and then people started openly identifying with being Jewish. They felt safe enough, which, Judaism, Muslim, are Semitic religions, which are marginalized and subordinate because the dominant culture, faith, or religion in America is Christianity. And, synagogues and mosques synagogues especially, are bombed just like the Black church historically has been. People are killed in the synagogues and in the Black church and things like that. And so when it comes to oppression, there's so many connections with that. Like they may have traveled different roads to the outcome, but it comes at the crossroad nonetheless. And they oftentimes run parallel. Like when I think about how my ancestors arrived by the slave ships on the transatlantic slave trade, which was horrific. But when I think about how horrific it was for Jews to arrive on cattle cars. So, just we're more alike than unalike. And I think that comes true through my soul. And so when I meet and encounter in trainings, whether it's marginalized people, whether it's dominant culture people, whether they're Black, Caribbean, African, whether they're Latinx, whether they're Turkish, whether they're whatever they identify, there's something magical when you create space of liberation and when you're able to curate and move at the speed of safety. And when people can feel your system with theirs and they can feel that something's happening here. I'm experiencing something. It's different. I really don't have words for it, but right. But but it's healing in and of itself. When we experience one another, that's an opportunity for healing that we lend one to the other. And so even with that, Annie, I didn't just wake up this way. Let me say that. It's been experiential. It's been in the formal spaces. It's been in the informal spaces. It has to do with my spirituality. It has to do with my public service. Like, I'm a community partner, right? I started out doing toilet paper drives for the homeless shelters in Atlanta, right? I was a young woman. I mean, young, because they would shut down the homeless shelters if the plumbing didn't work, which was a ploy of the mayor because they wanted that prime real estate. So, homeless just means you don't have a address, right? That's all it means, right? You don't have a consistent address. You're transient. You're without permanent address. And when I found that out, I started doing toilet paper drives so that they could and cleaning shelters. I would organize teams to come together. Let's go clean the shelter. My ex-husband would take the spray washer, the power sprayer. We'd bleach the bathrooms, hang up new curtains, load them up with toilet paper and things like that. Because I understood if the plumbing goes down, then you're going to shut down the shelter. You don't want the shelter there anyway. So let me nip that in the bud by giving them the toilet paper. So what I'm saying is where I'm coming from is not an event.
It's all of your life experiences that are coming in when you are preparing for, let's say, a 3-day training, a corporate training, any place that you're showing up. It's all of you that's showing up there. I love that. It's like you did wake up like this and it comes from all of that. I think that's probably it. I know it's making me breathe a little bit more deeply to hear that. I also want to say before we go, like, there's just this experience of talking to you both last time we talked and this time, where even though like I get to ask all the questions this time, it's like I still feel so seen. Like I remember when we talked recently and you just noticed, you're like, oh, that was a big breath. Like you really were releasing something there. It's very special to feel so seen by you. And I can imagine it happening in these events as well.
Thank you, Annie. And I'm doing my best to restrain myself a little bit as this is your formal podcast because location does matter for me and it's respect. I don't want to give you more to edit than necessarily needed, right? And I think that's the deal that we take all of us because you asked me an interesting question when we were meeting initially and you said, Tracy, with all that you do, how do you basically decompartmentalize what part of you that you're engaging at that time around the different roles I have, right? And I thought that was amazing the way that question, I'm paraphrasing it because Annie has a way of just kind of Shakespeare would love Annie because Shakespeare says that, what is it? Sobriety is the soul of wit, or there's brevity. Sorry. Brevity is the soul of wit. And you bring that in my engagement with you because I am so non sequitur. And I know this. Like I go from this to that, but I bounce around. I be doing my dance. But where I'm going with this, and I believe I said something to you like this, because I never say anything the same way twice, but being that I start from the vortex of the sense of self and everything that I do and I engage with all kind of sprouts out of that seed. It's like the same base. Maybe I put on a jacket or maybe I put on a sweater, maybe I wear a blouse, but I'm still dressing me. I'm just accessing more with more specificity of that particular part, but it all comes out of my well of life, out of my spring, if you will. And so it's not really a difference. The only difference is the audience and knowing your audience and what you're talking about and what you're zoning in, the more of what aspect. So it's not hard work. It's just being present. That's at the root of it, being present. And with that, I definitely want to say thank you for the space that we've co created. And I love when you said, that really resonated with me. And I had to go talk to my partner about that one. Here comes this heterosexual, cisgendered person that's even willing to fight for those that don't identify as perhaps heterosexual, because there are so many heterosexists that don't take the time to learn what's different. At least that's what I heard you say, Annie. I could be totally off base.
No, that's exactly. Yes. Yes. Thank you so much, Tracy. This was a freaking masterclass in to like how to run a group, how to be with a group of people and lead them. So I'm going to be sharing this one a lot.
My pleasure.
Learn more about Tracy at gracecommunitycounseling.com. I want to thank Cosmo Palms for editing this podcast. If you found this episode supportive, please share it with your favorite therapist or healer. That is absolutely how we reach more people. And thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next time.